I sometimes get invited to meetings that don't have any description in them. It's simply the title and then nothing else, which means I don't have any way to judge whether I should attend or not. It's just implied that I will. I want to have a Python file that I can use to quickly write a response to say that no, I'm not going to attend, or I'm only going to maybe attend, and that can change because again, I have nothing to judge whether I should join or not. And this is going to have several portions. I need a greeting and a closing. I need the name of the person who sent the meeting invite. I need the name of the invite, and then for fun's sake, I'll also have the name of company and sender. And this will all be combined into one text string. To begin with, I want to have a list that contains all of my greetings, and I want it to start from 1 so that the user can say what kind of greeting they want. So I want a formal greeting and a not formal greeting, and then a joke greeting. And I specifically want my first option to be empty. In Python, lists start from 0, well, indexes start from 0, and I want the user to pick 1, 2, or 3, so I'm intentionally leaving this empty. And I'll also have a space after the greeting, because then I don't have to add it later. I want a joke greeting, which makes it plainly clear that I'm just doing copy pasting here. And likewise for closers, I also want the first option to be empty, and the second option to be more formal, and then very, very formal. And then I can have a blank one, which would just mean that it would end up writing my name. And again, I want my last one to be a joke. And I want to have some inputs so that the user can say, well, what greeting do I want to use, which starts out at 0. And I'm picking 0 because the 0th option would be this empty string, which I don't want the user to pick. They need to pick 1, 2, or 3, or 1, 2, 3, or 4. And all of these variables will make more sense when I write the text itself, which will consist of an f string, meaning a text like up here, but where I have a variable inside, and that makes it easier to change it along the way, because that way you can have the variable be defined up here and the text down here, and then the text calls the variable, and it will look a lot nicer. And I think at this point it would make more sense if I write the actual text so you can see it, but I want that to be defined at the end. And all you have to do to make an f string is just write f at the start of your string. And I'm going to make all of my lines f strings, even though they don't have to, just to maintain this indenting, so I don't have it like this, because that would look silly. Which means at first it's going to take the result of your greeting, which is then my list, but I need the index position, and I'll get that later on, but I just think it makes more sense to see it now. So that will be my input greeting, which I haven't defined yet, but if my input greeting is then 1, it will say go into the greetings list, grab the index position 1, which would be dear space, and then because there's a space, I don't want to add a space here, but I can simply say here name of receiver. So again, if my input is 1, it will say dear space name of receiver. Yeah, so this is the text, which means I can't put in a separator, so my separator will be a line break, which is also why I'm formatting it like this. Here you can decide how formal you want to be, and I think it would be funnier to be very formal, because that's just the kind of person I am. The benefit here of having already defined my variables, even though I haven't actually assigned them a real value, it means I have access to intelligence when I write this, which is kind of nice actually. And likewise, because I have the space up here after the closer, I don't want to add a space in here, because then I'd have, well, double the spaces. And I do want to have some more code at the bottom here, which is what will happen to this main text, but before I get there, I think I should fill out the variables. So at this point, I have these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 options where something can be changed. So I need to define the input greeting up here and name of receiver up here, name of company, what closer you want to select from the list, and then the name of sender. And here I want to first off create a loop that keeps going until you select a proper greeting. And because I've defined it up here as being, well, it can be 1, 2, or 3, I can ask while not the output type is greater than 0, and it's been defined as being 0 up here. So right now it is already equal to 0, which means it's not greater than 0. And it also has to be less than 4, which means that it can only have the values 1, 2, and 3. Then I want to say that output type should equal the integer of an input. And here, if you want to be really annoying, you could make this a text in the input, but since this is a tool I'd use myself, I wouldn't go and make a check and say, well, you don't do the integer conversion right now. You first check whether you can convert it into an integer, and then you do so. And if you can convert it into an integer, then you need the user to stop trolling you. And the input will simply mean that in the command box, when you run the code, it will write out whatever I'm about to write, and then you can select something. And I only have 3 options. I want you to say, well, new line, and then 1. And this will be used down here when I decide what to do with it. So this would just type it normally in the command prompt, and then you'd select it and copy it. And this would make it so that at the end, when the code has finished running, you'd be able to click and then just hit Ctrl V to type in the email, which is the option I would prefer, because then I can decide when to use it. So I could receive my meeting, go and double click the file on the desktop, and then I can go and hit decline or hit the maybe attend button. And lastly, you can use pyautogui. And I would not recommend that option simply because, well, it will do an alt tab, and maybe you're in a position where you can't do that if you haven't clicked on create a new email or click on respond with an email. Then you might just be typing it in somewhere, and maybe you accidentally trigger a hotkey or something else, so that could have negative effects. So I would not do that. But now I've assigned the output type, and ideally the user is nice enough to actually put in a number, because it's going to do an integer conversion, and I don't know what would happen if you typed in text and it tries to do integer conversion. This is not something that's going out to my user, so I can allow it to have some mistakes in it. And then lastly, I want to check my condition up here with the loop, because I can say that if this isn't met, well, then I know that the loop is going to repeat, and I don't just want to keep typing this again and again and again. I want you to know that, hey, you're being annoying, please stop that. So I'll just be not so polite and say, hey, please type 1, 2, or 3. I need a double parentheses here, because this is the input, as I can see here with the little box around it, and the fact that it's pink, and now the second one will be red. No, that is yellow, and now it's happy. So this loop is going to keep going, and anytime you type something that isn't 1, 2, or 3, you're going to get this, please type 1, 2, or 3. And then the loop continues and continues and continues. But again, because this isn't going out to a user, I wouldn't bother making it better than this. And I actually want to do the same thing, well, the same check for the closer, but here the trick is that I have 4 valid options. So I don't want it to go up to 4, I want it to go up to 5. And actually I can be even fancier and say that instead of hard coding the 5 in here, and likewise with 4, I could actually go and say that it should be less than the length of my list, and likewise length of list. And I just have to remember to say greetings in this here. Actually, that is, no, I'm actually being wrong. I got ahead of myself. I do want this to be 1, 2, and 3, because I specify here you can only select 1, 2, and 3. But here I do want it to be length of, and that would be my greeting. And likewise here I want it to be length of greeting. And it is not output type, it is my input greeting. And that is then fine. But I want to change the text in here. It does not select the output of your code, it is select greeting. But conveniently it's still 1, 2, and 3. And of course this message is going to be wrong if you add more greetings up here, because you might want to add multiple greetings if you wanted it to be able to handle multiple languages, if you really wanted to do that for some reason. And now I can also copy that, but this time it's for the closers. So that is input greetings. I want to change that to input greetings, no input closings. And of course I'm intentionally making mistakes, because that's how it happens in real life or whatever. It makes it look like everyone makes mistakes. So again, input closings greater than 0, and it needs to be less than the length. And because the length then has 1 extra item up here, it should be fine. Because the length of closers is then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and less than 5, well, because this is index position 4, if you type in 4, it will be less than 5, and there are 5 items. So that's a little a happy accident that Python starts indexes from 0, but this should then be changed to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I should also change that. So it is not a polite greeting, it is for the text regards. And then that can be a little trolling. Which means now I have the index position of the greeting you want, the index position of the closer you want, and I have the output type which will be used down here at the bottom. Which means I still need the name of receiver, name of company, and name of sender. And that should also be equal to an input, which is simply type in the name of who invited you. And again, I do want you to have the option to do a little trolling, so I will do that. And luckily it's very easy to check if it's blank, because that is straight up just saying if the name of receiver is equal to blank. In other words, if it's identical to the value blank, because Python likes having those double equals signs. And here I'm just doing a one line if, because it's just if this is true. Then I want name of receiver to be equal to that. And it's the same logic for the name of company, but instead of the name of who invited you, it should be the name of your company. And again, the name of company. But for the name of the sender, that would be you. Here I do want a condition where if you type in, say 1, then it will get your login name. So in my case, that would be Wesley. But for your work computer, it might be your full name. And if you don't want to do a little trolling and you actually want to use this tool properly, then it might be nice. And to do that, I need to import OS. And actually, I can do that. Instead of importing it, no matter what, I can say it only gets imported if you select that option. And I think that's nicer to reduce the number of import statements you have. This means I want that to be equal to the input. And of course you can type in your name normally, because it is an input box. And I don't remember if I had the empty line. I did. Yeah. And here I want a normal if statement then. Well, a normally formatted if statement. So right now name of sender can be equal to blank. And if that's the case, I want the trolling option. Means that name of sender is equal to insert your name. And for me, at least with my VBA background, this is super confusing that I have double equal marks and a single equal mark. But in Python, it just means if the value of name of sender is identical to that. And here it says assign name of sender to have the value. In case you needed that. And otherwise, if name of sender is identical to 1, and here it's not the number 1 because input gives you a string. Just need to say. And of course, if name of sender isn't identical to blank and it isn't identical to 1, that means you've written in your name manually and these checks will fail. So that's fine. And only if you select 1, which is to get your username automatically, then it will import OS, which I assume stands for operating system. And that will be equal to os.getLogin, which is a function, so I need to remember the the open close parentheses. And at that point I have everything I want. I have name of sender, input closing comes up here, closers comes up here, and name of company is there. And this is super nice, the highlighting in Visual Studio Code, so I can see actually where does all of this happen. And that means I messed up, and that was super nice because I wouldn't have seen that otherwise. Here, that's the danger of copy pasting, because it should not be, this is about the greetings, so this should be input greetings, but this should be input closings. And now that's fine. So that was very fortunate I chose to do that. And greetings and greetings, greetings, greetings. That's all very nice. And my main text, I don't have to do anything to that. So I do prefer having the parentheses like this, so I can see that they're about the same position. And then I actually need to use the output type, which hasn't been used yet. And I'm going to use match because I think that makes more sense in this case. So this is simply saying, well, case 1, and I did define the output type to be an integer. That's why I'm not putting it in parentheses. So I don't have to do that, but I think doing the int check here, that is trying to convert the input into an integer, that will be a helpful check if you really wanted to make sure that the user is doing what they're supposed to. So if you selected case 1, now I need to remember what that means. That means you want the email typed in the command prompt, which means it simply needs to print whatever you have. So I want to first print a new line, then print the main text, and then The problem here is that it's going to immediately close once it's printed the main text, because that's the last line of code, and I can have this input open close, which simply means that the command prompt keeps waiting for an input, but it will just stay open, which also means that you can then highlight the text, copy it, and then just write whatever and press enter and it will close. And that was everything for the first case. If case is equal to 2, then you want the pyperclip, and here I do want to check that you actually have it installed. So I'll try to import pyperclip. And if this succeeds, then you can simply say pyperclip.copy, and it should copy the main text. And then I can just type in. And likewise, I want it to be kept open using input. If this then fails, meaning you haven't installed pyperclip, then I want to say, well, if I get the error, import error, meaning you haven't installed whatever it's trying to import. So this is a more specific error catching. And I did not find this myself. I need to remember to give credit. That was the thread where I got that solution from. That is specifically checking if the import failed. Here I want to tell the user that you need to install pyperclip. And again, I need to have the input. Finally, I can say case 3, which is then to do the same thing I did up here. But instead of pyperclip, I want it to be pyautogui. And say again, you need to install pyautogui. And I'm just going to copy that because I can see I'm making spelling mistakes. And then I do want that no, there's no point to have the print because it will happen and it's very clear what's happening. So I also don't want that. I simply want to import. I already imported. Then I can say pyautogui.hotkeys, and that's the Alt and Tab. Now I can try running that, and it would help if I closed after printing. And it's not satisfied because it's indented, and Python really likes indenting, which is normally very nice, but not in this situation. So here it's saying, if we go all the way up, saying what is the output of your code? Well, I want it to be typed in the command prompt first. And what is my greeting? I want that. Actually, that was select greeting, and I can see I forgot, and that's why I somewhat don't like copying code, but that is fixed now, which is also why I want to run it here while I'm being recorded. Type in the name, that would be Jesper. And what is the name of my company? That is my company. And I just want to get that from my login name. And if I expand that, it will be easier to see. And you can see if you ran this in the proper command prompt, you'd see that this line is blinking because it's waiting. And I can see that I might have a space right there, which I want to figure out why I have that. But right now, that is simply everything I wanted. You can then copy it and go wherever with whatever email it is you use and simply type it in like that. And then boom, it's done. I can run it again and say this time I want it saved to my clipboard. And now it is greeting and that is closing. And the name would just be blank to do a little trolling. A name of company to do a little trolling. And then I want to write it in normally. And it'll simply say that your email has been copied to the clipboard, and actually I would like to have a space there before, as I did here. So I could do \n for a new line, which means again, if I open up Notepad and type that in, you can see that this is not Jesper as it was before. To show the pyautogui solution, I want to run it as a normal program, which I can get here by pressing the for video. And right now, if I Alt tab, I will then go into the notepad, which is fine. So I can say pyautogui and blank and blah, 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 blah. And it looks fine, but again, I would prefer not using this method because what if something happens? What if something interrupts you? Then you could end up typing this somewhere you don't want, like in your code window, and then you have to delete it and whatever. I would personally pick the solution where it uses the pyperclip. And for me personally, I've taken this code and actually removed all of the interactivity and just made it the pyperclip version where it just copies the trolling version so that I have a file like here where I just double click it and then my clipboard becomes the trolling email that I can then send to the client, and I can do that very fast if I want to. But that was everything. Yep.